Hey you guys, this is Mar-Lyn with Beautiful Bina Designs, back with another Tuesday Quickie. This is where we make a card together from start to finish, trying to keep card making achievable and relatively simple. These are the basic supplies we'll be starting with today. I have a card panel and a card base, which was made using my Cougar Digital 110-pound cardstock. That is standard A2 size, which is 5.5 by 4.25. We will also be using a piece of Velum, and I have this fancy die which creates kind of a peekaboo look on the card. In addition, we'll be using our stamps and coordinating dies from the most recent My Monthly Hero card kit, September 2018. In addition, we'll be using basic embossing supplies. Here we have a brown strip of cardstock where we will be stamping our sentiment. To get started, we will go ahead and begin embossing some of our images as well as the sentiment. For today's project, I've selected Life is Full of Beauty. We're going to be stamping down all of the Chinese lantern images that came with the September 2018 My Monthly Hero card kits. There is a large, a medium, and then one that's quite a bit smaller. Again, using all three of them, I am stamping down the images several times using Distress embossing ink, and then I'll be going over them with Hero Arts Fine Detail White embossing powder. Right now I'm laying that embossing powder over the images, and in just a moment I will stamp the sentiment and cover that with the embossing powder as well, so that we can go in and heat set everything at one time. That first image that I stamped down of the largest Chinese lantern plant, I didn't stamp it very well. I didn't put enough pressure on the one side, and so I simply created a second image of that. Here I am going in with the sentiment. Once again, I'll be laying that white embossing powder over the sentiment as well. And then we'll be heating everything using my Wagner heat tool. It is, that Wagner heat tool is one that is recommended by several crafters, professional and otherwise, who have shared their opinions on YouTube videos and through blogs and things like that. I do believe, in my opinion, that the Wagner heat tool is the best heat tool out there for embossing. At least in my experience and from what I've heard from other crafters. I did have an American Crafts heat tool for a little while, and I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, when I got this Wagner tool, it was a game changer. Now when I'm melting that embossing powder on the vellum, or when you're doing anything with a heat tool on vellum, you want to make sure you keep that heat tool moving. Constant movement. The vellum is more delicate than cardstock, and if you stay in one place, even just for a couple of seconds, you will burn your paper. So a tip there is to just keep that moving, and you'll be fine. So now I've cut out a card panel out of that vellum, and I've also die cut all of those Chinese lantern images. Putting those to the side, we're going to use this fancy die to cut from the top and the bottom of the card panel that peekaboo look. To me, it reminds me kind of pebbles. I don't know who makes this die. I don't remember. It's just from my stash, but I have a similar one that cuts hearts, and there's so many background dies out there. You could really achieve this look with any of them. I'm coming in now with that piece of vellum and 3 colors of Distress Oxide inks. I've got Wild Honey, Fired Brick, and Peeled Paint. I'm going for an autumn card here, and I am using those very earthy and warm autumn colors. I will be ink smushing the vellum. First, I'm going to add some water. I use my paper towel to protect my work surface, because when I spray that water, those inks will get everywhere. So I've gone ahead and I'm just smushing this ink right onto the vellum. You'll see it begins to curl. That is not a problem at all, because we're going to use a heat tool later and flatten it back out. Once you've wet this vellum and then heat set it, it gets kind of a crispy, wrinkled look and feel, which in my opinion is very reminiscent of an autumn leaf that may have fallen from a tree and landed on the ground. It's got kind of that look and feel, I think, and as a result, makes a great element for an autumn card. Once again, you always want to keep your heat tool moving when you are heat setting anything on vellum. After heat setting this and taking a good look at it, I feel like I may have ink smushed it a couple too many times and blended those colors together more than I had hoped. So I'm going back in with just some of that fired brick to add some more red tone to the top of that panel. Now here you will see, I've left this in to show you what happens if you do, look right there, if you keep that heat on your vellum for even a second too long, you will burn your vellum, and that's what I've done right here. Now I'm checking with that peekaboo pattern, do I need to recreate that vellum piece, or can it be camouflaged with the cardstock in front of it? And I decide that we can move forward. It will be camouflaged just fine. But if we were going to use that without something in front of it, I definitely would have created a new vellum panel. Here I'm using my Ranger Multimedia Matte, and I am putting a lot of glue in the center, a strip of glue in the top and the bottom, and then strategic dots that can be camouflaged and hidden behind that cardstock. So in a moment I will put a couple of acrylic blocks here. It enables me to put some even pressure and really make sure we get a good hold. I leave them sit for a couple of minutes, making sure that that vellum, which still wants to curl up a little bit, has a nice adhesion and wants to stay put on that cardstock. So here we can see those autumn colors going through. We can see them through that peekaboo die cut, and the colors in person are more vibrant than what the camera is picking up, so it does look quite nice. Here we'll be putting the different elements we've created, we'll be laying them down on the card panel. And I decided to go with a subtle sort of tone on tone with the vellum and the white embossing, but certainly you could hear gold emboss, or maybe even it would have been, I think, really pretty, and maybe I'll try something like this. It would have been really pretty to use those Distress Oxides, the wild honey, the fired brick, and the peeled paint, and then clear emboss them. So use those colored inks to stamp the images and then give them some shine and dimension with clear embossing over top. Once again, using the Ranger Multimedia Matte, I am just laying down the elements to finish creating this card panel. I'm going to use 4 of the images that I created, 1 of the largest, 1 of the medium, which is still pretty large, and then 2 of those very small Chinese lantern images. Trying to strategically place them so that for the most part those stems glue to the white cardstock and we still get the autumn shades of that vellum poking through. Now I'm putting the sentiment down across the middle, life is full of beauty, and trying my best to make sure that I don't glue any of those leaves under the strip, but I do get one in there. And I use my Spellbinders all-in-one tool to just slip it back out. Here I'm going to come back in and trim off the excess of everything, that sentiment strip and the images where some of those stems are coming over the card panel. Now at this point, I could have added some fun foam and popped it up, but I thought there was enough going on and I decided to adhere it directly to the card base. So I'm doing the same thing here with that Ranger Multimedia Matte, adding a bunch to the middle, strips to the top and bottom, and then tiny little dots that will hide behind the cardstock when the card panel is adhered to that card base. I do want to get this lined up well, so I am using my craft mat as a flat surface to make sure that the card is flush with the bottom, that the panel is flush with the bottom of that card base. Going in around the edges, anywhere that I didn't get a solid connection, the card panel to the card base, some of those little die cut pieces, I'm just going in and adding a little bit of glue so that nothing pops up or peels away from the card base. Just making sure that the recipient gets a card that gets through the mail and gets to them still very well put together. Finally, I am adding some metallic gold dots. These are dots that I made with gold embossing powder. It is the Ranger, let me see which shade of gold. I used Ranger, it is called just gold, Ranger Gold embossing powder, and I put a lot of embossing powder on, this was in a previous video actually, I put a lot of embossing powder on a heart, a die cut heart, and I was trying to make a very puffy gold embossed heart. Eventually that embossing powder got very thick and began to drip, and I made a bunch of dots. I really like this look, so you can kind of see them a little bit there. That's our card for this week. I hope I've inspired you to make beautiful things, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care now.